got Tony Owens from Northampton South. We have Paul Hogan from South Northamptonshire. We have Ben Habib, who's standing for us in Wellingborough. We've got Scott Cameron from Daventry, and we've got Eddie MacDonald from Corby in East Northamptonshire. I've been around a bit, so you won't listen to me for too long, but I originally started with the Brexit Party and stood in the European election with Richard Tice and Ben and many others, and I've been doing all the voluntary work since then to get to the position we are now, which is just 5 weeks to go until a general election. I think Ben's going to speak first. Ben's got to do an interview with DB News, I believe, later, so Ben's going to speak first and tell you a bit about the campaign, what our aims are in this election, and what we hope to achieve. And probably more importantly, this is not just a one stab at one election. We've got a plan for the next 5 to 6 years. Personally, I believe there will be another election in perhaps 2. That's just my opinion. We'll see. So it's going to be interesting. So, ladies and gentlemen, could I introduce Ben Habib, who of course is our party deputy.
I might just come down here if that's all right. It seems such a long way up there. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for giving up your evening. I forget sometimes what day of the week. I think it's Friday, isn't it? It's been a busy week. We've had, last Wednesday, Wednesday before last, I woke up thinking, well, we're going to have a November election. There's ample time to get our ducks in a row. I was due to have a party in Wellingborough on the 18th of June, I think. No, 27th of June, a drinks party to thank everyone for campaigning for me in the by-election. And then suddenly that day, Rishi Sunak obviously panicked and decided he was going to go for the slimmest of opportunities he had to call the general election. And he did it because inflation was down to 2.3%. That's how bad the circumstances are of the United Kingdom. Inflation drops, Prime Minister thinks that's the best news we're ever going to get. Let's go for a general election. And anyway, so it's been a really manic week. We had the press conference last Thursday morning, which you may or may not have seen. I was quite discombobulated at that. Press conference wasn't my best speech because everything was happening so quickly, and I've had to get a campaign team together. All of you are obviously in exactly the candidates who are standing are obviously all in the same boat. But the good news is the phony war is over. We are now on a war footing as far as politics is concerned. General election is like going to war. We do it in a very nice way, of course, before anyone tweets this and says, Ben says we're going to war. And it's terrific to be doing it. I can't wait to get stuck in. Now, we have decided to call this election the immigration election. And that might raise some people's hackles, but it shouldn't. And the reason we're calling it the immigration election is because, as you might have noticed, immigration is completely out of control. Throughout the 80s and 90s, we had net immigration of around 10,000 people per annum. Maybe some years it will be 30,000. And then we got Tony Blair in 1997, who took it upon himself to befriend the entire world, throwing open our borders, eschewing what I define as the nation state, which we all define as the nation state, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and putting his eggs into the globalist basket. And ever since then, we've had an increase in immigration. And David Cameron came into office. We thought, great, we've got a Conservative Prime Minister. And he said he was going to bring immigration down to tens of thousands. Do you remember that? And what's happened? It's gone up and up and up. And then Rishi Sunak came in. We got Brexit. Brexit gave us control of immigration. And instead of actually exercising that control, they just threw caution to the wind, set the minimum wage in order to get a work visa to come to the UK at 25% below the average wage in the UK, importing cheap labour. And what do you do if you import cheap labour? Well, you do a lot of nasty things to the economy. The first of which is you undermine British workers' ability to get a fair wage. Because if you increase the supply of a commodity, in this case labour, the demand stays the same, and you can't increase the price of that commodity, which is done through wages. So we've had very low wage growth in the United Kingdom over the last 10, 14 years. Of course, we've had very significant inflation over that period, and people per head have been getting poorer and poorer. The government focuses on GDP as its metric for whether or not the country is doing well, but it doesn't look at GDP per capita. And it's GDP per head, per capita, that matters, because that's an assessment of how wealthy we are. So we've had unbridled immigration causing British workers the inability to earn a fair wage. And the direct consequence of that is that we've now got 6 million people, that's about 20% of the British workforce, surviving on universal credit to a greater extent, to a greater or lesser extent. 1.5 million of the 6 million people are working and still taking benefits. 1.5 million are taking benefits and looking for a job, and the rest of them aren't even looking for a job. Many of them are claiming to have mental health issues. So we've got a broken labour market. The United Kingdom literally isn't working. And the other thing that's happened, this is nothing to do with immigration, but because the economy hasn't been doing well, and the Treasury can't afford its spending plans, it's done what it believes to be the easiest way to raise money, which is tax us to the hilt. So taxes are up to a 70-year high since World War II. You're being taxed more now than you have ever been taxed under any government since World War II. It's an extraordinary situation. And that's after the government's got record levels of debt again since World War II. But the other impact of immigration is that it creates a massive burden on the public sector. So when they say that the NHS waiting lists are up, we can't cope, it's no surprise, is it, if the population of the country is growing by about 1.5% per annum, the NHS is going to be stressed. 750,000 people came in last year, net, 1.4 million gross. 750,000 people also need housing, don't they? And if you're to house 750,000 people, roughly, you've got to build a couple of 100,000 houses. We don't build more than a couple of 100,000 houses every year anyway. And we already had a housing shortage. And it's no surprise that rents have gone up 30%. So it's caused problems with housing. It's caused problems with our labour markets. It's caused problems with the NHS. It's caused problems naturally with our schools, which are also being overburdened. And the nature of the immigration that this government has allowed isn't just people coming in for work, but also coming here to study, and believe it or not, bringing their dependents with them. So a couple of 100,000 people are in this country, literally because they're the dependents, come in, literally because they're dependents of people who are studying in the United Kingdom. They're not even working. And we simply can't cope. But at the heart of this problem, which I've touched on, is a government that doesn't care about the nation state that is the United Kingdom. Both the Labour Party, don't you find it odd that a Conservative MP can get up and cross the floor and sit in the Labour Party? You would think that ideologically they're opposite. Hands up in this room if you think it's perfectly normal for a Conservative MP to cross the floor to go and sit in Labour. But the reason they can do it is because they're both globalist parties. They like to talk about the left and the right. There's no such thing as lefties and extreme left or extreme right. There's no such thing as centre-right or centre-left. That's gone. The Labour Party used to be a left-wing party when it stood for workers' rights in this country. But the Labour Party doesn't stand for British workers. It hasn't stood for British workers for at least 30 years. It believes in immigration. How can you champion the British working class if you believe in immigration? So the real problem here is the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are both globalists. And what I mean by that is that they don't think that the prosperity of the United Kingdom comes through making policy for the betterment of the United Kingdom and the betterment of the British people. They think that it comes through some kind of global prosperity through which we will prosper. But the minute you make that decision, the minute you think that global prosperity leads to domestic prosperity, you've actually literally turned your back on the United Kingdom. The nation state of the United Kingdom ceases to be important. So they don't care about borders, they don't care about immigration, they don't care about a settled culture, they don't care about history, they don't care about Northern Ireland. Anyone from Northern Ireland here? 1.8 million people in Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom until a couple of years ago. In 1982, we launched virtually our entire armed forces to go and protect 1,800 people, 10,000 miles away, who were accompanied by 10,000 sheep. There were that was the extent of the protectorate that we launched our armed forces for. Wind the clock forward 40 years, without a single shot being fired, without a plebiscite, without any pressure, the United Kingdom has put a border, our government has put a border down the Irish Sea and handed over 1.8 million people to the European Union. And why does that matter? It matters for this reason. The reason I fought Northern Ireland so hard is because if our government won't stand up for 1.8 million people across the Irish Sea, under pressure they won't stand up for you either, and that's what we're seeing. And immigration is a symptom of our political class giving up on the United Kingdom, literally not caring whether we exist because they're globalists. Reform UK believes in the United Kingdom. Its foundation block is the belief that all policy in this country should be made for the United Kingdom and for the people of the United Kingdom. And we may get things wrong. You may not like every policy we've got, but every policy we have made is with that central aim in mind, protecting, promoting this country. And what we offer in our policy agenda is diametrically opposite to what the two globalist parties offer. I'm not going to start with immigration, I've touched on that quite a lot. I'm going to start with net zero. Net zero is a globalist phenomenon. The net zero targets that have been established were established not by a British government, they were established by the Paris Accord, enforced by the European Union, and made into international law because of the various treaties we've signed. So when people say, well, you don't believe in net zero, you're a climate denier. No. Then they don't equate. Just because we want to protect our environment and we care about the climate, and the climate may or may not be changing, I don't even want to get into that debate. The policy of net zero is a policy which has not been brought through with the British people's interests in mind. It's something that the Europeans, the Americans, and others together dreamt up. And we produce less than 1% of the carbon emissions in the world. We have ample gas in the North Sea, ample gas in the North Sea. Gas is a clean fuel. Internal combustion engines are much cleaner now than they used to be, and so on and so forth. And by the way, electric vehicles produce a lot of carbon emissions through the rubber that they throw off on their the rubber thrown off by their tyres, the very heavy cars, and the tarmac damage that they do, and of course all the environmental damage that lithium batteries do. And so this is a political agenda, net zero, and it has made the United Kingdom energy dependent when it could have been energy independent, and that is crucial for a nation state to have its own cheap energy supplies. It's a huge burden on our industry, and that is symptomatic again of the globalist agenda. Reform UK would ditch net zero. That's our biggest economic policy. The other thing this government will tell you repeatedly is that it's not safe to cut taxes. It would be imprudent to cut taxes because we've spent so much money. We can only do it if it's funded. Have you heard the expression funded tax cuts? It's like sacrosanct. It's like a religion. You can't cut taxes unless we can balance the budget. Have you heard this? Hunt says it all the time. So if we were always balancing our books, How the hell did our debt level as a country go from 850 billion in 2010 to 2.1 trillion now? These guys haven't been balancing jack diddly squat. But they spend money on what they want to spend it on. And the net zero agenda, by the government's own estimate, and they never overestimate, they always underestimate, but by their own estimate, is 1.4 trillion. It would add another 70% to our national debt to deliver the net zero agenda. It is literally going to bankrupt this country. So they want to tax you. They want to destroy your incentive to work. Not only are they undercutting the labour market with cheap imported labour, they're overtaxing us, as I mentioned. So our signature tax policy is to move the threshold at which tax is paid from £12,500 per annum, the income threshold, £12,500 per annum, to £20,000 per annum. That would take 6 million people out of the tax net. And we would also increase the 40% tax band from £50,000 per annum to £70,000 per annum. You will not hear that from the government. And what they'll tell you is, oh, it's reckless. But it ain't reckless, because actually if you slash immigration, you let wages rise, and you cut taxes, the 6 million people who are not working and taking benefits will be able to earn a fair wage. They'll come into the labour market, and the Exchequer picks up roughly 11 to £12,000 per annum per head from taxpayers who are working. And they've ceased to take benefits. And benefits are roughly £14,000 per head per annum. So when you go from being on benefits to being in work, there's a £25,000 roughly benefit for the government's books. But it won't do it. It would rather tax you into a position where it doesn't pay to work. Reform UK will cut taxes on the working and middle class. The Labour Party does not stand for the working and middle class. The Conservative Party most certainly does not stand for the working and middle class. They will have rampant immigration, they will keep a lid on wages, and they will overtax the working class. We will do the opposite. We will liberate the working class. Nor do they stand for business. What was Rishi Sunak's first thing to do? Business was kicked in the shins by lockdown. Businesses went bust. You know, they tell you the furlough scheme prevented businesses from going bust. That's bollocks. What the furlough scheme did was allow businesses to go bust, and it printed money to keep people away from penury, to allow people to feed themselves. What they did, businesses went bust. That's what happened during the pandemic. And as we emerged from lockdown, what was the first thing he did? He put up corporation tax from 20% to 25%. Why would you open a business in Great Britain on a 25% corporation tax rate if in Dublin you can pay 12.5%? Do you know what the tax take was? Sorry, tell me if I'm talking. The tax take in this country is about £65 billion per annum. We're a big country, right? 5th largest economy in the world. Ireland, with all due respect to the Republic of Ireland, is a minnow. Their tax rate is 12.5% per annum. Ours is 25% per annum on corporates. Their tax take from corporation tax is more than a third of ours. It's 25 billion per annum. They are rolling in money. And why are they rolling in money? Because they've got a low corporation tax rate. Global capital is fluid. It can park itself where it wants to park itself. It'll find the lowest tax rate that it can in a decent country. So Rishi Sunak is deterring investment in the UK by putting a globalist tax rate, applying a globalist tax rate. And the other thing he's done with the OECD is sign a treaty saying that we will never cut our corporation tax below 15%. Why would you sign a treaty with your competitors saying that we will ensure we are never competitive? It's because they don't give a damn about the United Kingdom. And we would cut corporation tax rate to Reform UK would cut corporation tax rate to 20%, and we would cut it again to 15% at the first opportunity. We would also raise the VAT threshold to £150,000. We'd raise the threshold at which corporation tax is paid to £150,000, taking loads of small businesses straight out of the tax net, making it worthwhile to start your business. We'd abolish IR35, which has been so damaging to sole traders, enabling them to go forward. We will abolish business rates. Business rates is an evil tax. In an attempt to start a business, you get your shop. Before you even made a penny, you're paying the government tax. And business rates have gone up and up and up. We will abolish business rates for small and medium-sized enterprises. And that is the theme. I won't go any on it because there's other people who want to speak. But that is the theme of Reform UK. It is making sure that our private enterprise, that are working in middle classes, that the people of this country can actually be genuinely prosperous, that our public services therefore work, because as a prosperous country we'll be able to afford to spend the money that we need to spend to make them work, because the exchequer will be richer, and so on. We're in a downward spiral at the moment. This country needs a 180-degree turn in order to save itself. And the two globalist parties won't do it. I haven't even touched on the cultural damage they're doing to this country. But if you don't care about the nation state, you don't care about the culture. It's important, in a way, if you don't care about the nation state, to attack the culture of a country. How do you attack the culture of a country? You tell everyone that their forefathers were slave traders, that we need to be ashamed of whom we are. If you can sap a nation of its self-confidence in its history, then you've captured the people, because they become compliant. They're ashamed of themselves. I went to Wellingborough School when I was running in the by-election, and I asked the politics sixth form students, how many of you in this room think that we owe the wealth in this country to the slave trade? 2/3 of the hands went up. There was no recognition of the brilliant agrarian revolution that was born in this country, or the industrial revolution, or the fantastic common law system we have that makes us such a fantastic trading entity. You know, our law is critical, the way our law is set up. So when people say to me, Ben, what do you mean, the culture of the United Kingdom? You can't even define the culture. The difficulty in defining the culture is because they've hijacked the culture. They've told us really our culture is tolerate all people, be nice, be kind. I mean, there isn't a single culture in the world that says don't be kind or don't be nice. But that's what we've been reduced to ridiculousness. So the answer, by the way, when someone says to you, what is the British culture? My answer is nothing more than the true contextual position in which we find ourselves because of our great history. And so don't lie about my history. Those of us in the room who are over 50, I'm 50, I'm going to be 59 next week, we were taught to be proud of our country, weren't we, when we were at school? We were taught that the empire was a force for good, that actually we did. And I can tell you, I can testify to it, because I was born in Karachi. 1965, Karachi, post-British Imperial Pakistan. The roads were clean, the buildings were fantastic, the judicial system worked, the drainage was terrific. It was a really peaceable, great place to have my childhood. As soon as every year that passed and we got further and further away from British imperial influence, the country's got worse and worse and worse. And what we mustn't allow to happen in this country is for that to take root. There is only one party, genuinely only one party. It's not the Conservatives, they're globalists. It's not Labour, they're globalists. Liberal Democrats are globalists squared. It's certainly not the bloody SNP. It's not Sinn Féin. We've got a First Minister in Northern Ireland who doesn't condemn terrorism. That's how bad things are. We had Hamza Yusuf, First Minister in Scotland, telling us that if you're white, somehow it's an offence to have white people in office. Did you see that speech? Did anyone see that speech? So-and-so's white, so-and-so's white. If you got up and you said so-and-so's brown, so-and-so's brown, you'd be accused of being a racist, wouldn't you? But that's where we've got to in this country. There's only one party that will put this country first, and that is Reform UK. Thank you very much, ladies.